Welcome to Asking for a Trend. We're learning that the Gates Foundation has some new and ambitious goals going forward. The foundation plans to close in 2045, with Bill Gates saying he will donate 99% of his remaining fortune earlier than previously planned. Mark Sussman is here with us now. He's CEO of the foundation. He's here with us in the studio. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So this is quite an acceleration. The foundation spent $100 billion in its first 25 years, and now is going to double that in the next 20 years. And it's a time when the stakes are pretty high, right? I was reading today, there was an analysis in the journal Nature that estimated that 25 million more people could die within the next 15 years, specifically because of the pulling of aid from the United States. And I was struck by something that Bill wrote in his note discussing this announcement. He said, quote, "None of this progress that the foundation has made is possible without partnership from governments." Was the closure of USAID and the pulling of some of this funding a catalyst for this move on the part of the foundation?
Not directly. The truth is, this is something that Bill and I and the board have been discussing for over a year. We knew we were coming up to our 25th anniversary, which is this year. We were founded in 2000. And we were trying to really look back and say, where have we made the greatest impact? And where and how could we make the even bigger impact going forward? And looking back, we've spent $100 billion to date, which is by far the largest amount of any philanthropy. $43 billion of that has come from the generosity of Warren Buffett. And when we looked at what we did, we saw we'd made amazing progress against goals like reducing preventable child mortality. Deaths have been cut in half from over 10 million deaths a year to under 5 million deaths a year today. We've seen big cuts in mortality for the infectious diseases, which still kill many more people in the global south among the poorest than any others: HIV, TB, malaria. And so we were already looking ahead and saying, we think by 2045, we could potentially almost solve these problems. By solve, I mean we would bring them down to rates that are equivalent to what we have in the United States today, death rates from big diseases like HIV or TB. You don't know anyone who's suffering from TB, I think.
Right.
You know, we tend not to see it, but it's still the infectious disease that kills more people than any other. So we were going to make that commitment regardless. And Bill decided that he wanted to bring forward the date of his commitment. He was always going to commit to spend the bulk of his fortune to the foundation, but it was going to be spent within 20 years of his death.
Right.
And now we brought that forward and said it's going to be within 20 years from today, because at our current budget levels, which are about to reach $9 billion a year, which is a record, we want to be able to stay steady and consistent and reliable. And as you pointed out, this is at a moment now where there are significant cuts happening from the US, but not just the US alone, into areas that have traditionally supported our work. And so we felt it was more important than ever that we put a stake in the ground and say, actually, we are fully committed to this, and we think these are goals that are still achievable.
So does that mean, Mark, that the foundation has to do more to fill those gaps, that it might not be able to meet some of its most ambitious goals because it is doing the things, funding some of the activities that governments used to step in and fund?
Well, partially, but not exactly. Okay. So it is true that the successes that we've seen over the last 25 years have come through huge support from governments, especially the US government. The US is by far the largest funder of global health. As I said, our budget is nearly $9 billion a year. The USAID budget used to be $44 billion a year. Total US aid a year used to be $69 billion a year. That's being cut. Clearly, neither we nor any combination of philanthropies can fill a gap of that size. Also, philanthropy does things that's different from government. We fund innovation. We can take risks. So we'll fund big vaccine trials. We have a $700 million trial going on to look for a new tuberculosis vaccine. That may or may not work. That's a risk a government can't take. We think our biggest strength is funding innovation, new tools for farmers, new ways to use AI to help education. That's where we can make a difference. And then we have to work. Governments working with the private sector and civil society are how these products get to reach the people who need them, whether it's school children in the US, whether it's people who need access to HIV treatments or malaria bed nets globally. And that's why we still want to make the case that hopefully the US, and not just the US, other countries that are also looking to cut back, like the United Kingdom or France, really halt those cutbacks and focus what remains on what we believe are the most impactful investments. Those are the investments that really we can prove save lives, are not wasted, and do it very cheaply and effectively.
One of the forces behind the cuts here in the U.S., maybe the main one, was Elon Musk with his work at Doge. And Bill Gates, in interviews, has not minced words when it comes to Musk. So one of the things he said in to the New York Times was, "The world's richest man has been involved in the deaths of the world's poorest children." Now, I'm not going to ask you to opine specifically on Musk unless you really want to, but I would ask you about the broader attitude amongst the wealthy, because this sort of decline in giving, it's not new to this current moment, right? You and I have talked about it before. What's going on there? Why aren't we seeing that philanthropy in the same way we were before?
Yeah, well, let me take it in two parts, because the first part is, do we think government could be more efficient? Do we think that areas that work on international aid or others could be more efficient? Absolutely, we do. That's something we work on, and we make sure when we partner with what used to be USAID or other partners, we make sure that our dollars are being used as efficiently as possible. We drive down costs. We've helped bring down the costs of global vaccines 10 to 20-fold over the last 2 decades. And so when we talk about looking for efficiencies in government, we want it to be fact-based, really do the detailed analysis. Some programs don't work and are expensive and should be cut. Some programs do work really well. And our belief is strongly, if you could go to a US taxpayer and say, we can show you how a single dollar of your taxpayer dollars are going and literally saving a mother's life in childbirth and allowing that kid to survive, and not just survive, but thrive, do you think that's a worthwhile use of your tax dollars? I am confident that 99% of them would say yes. And I think that's also part of the challenge with philanthropy writ large that you talked about. The one group of people that have got much wealthier over the last half decade are the world's very richest. The number of billionaires has actually increased significantly. But the number of very generous philanthropists has not increased at the same rate as the number of billionaires. And so certainly with today's announcement, what we're hoping at both is the Gates Foundation, and I know Bill personally is hoping that he can help inspire and encourage both existing philanthropists, because we do have some great partners who do work. We just had, at the event we just held at Carnegie Hall, we had Mike Bloomberg was there, who's an amazing partner. There are other global leaders. But we hope we can encourage many more to give at scale, and to give to today's problems. That's the other thing with our timeline. We don't want to do it for some hypothetical future. The needs are here now. The opportunities are here now, and you can make a really amazing impact.
Something else I want to ask you about specific to this administration, just to give an example. You mentioned TB before, and there is a TB vaccine that's in the works, that's in trials. Do you have any concerns about approvals of a product like that in the United States under this current regime?
No. Well, we hope, and in this particular case, we carry out the trials in a very robust and thoughtful and thorough way. We actually support, there's a Gates Medical Research Institute which is overseeing that trial. It uses the best of modern best practice global standards to make sure that everything we're doing is very effective. And we believe the evidence dossier that we'll be able to provide is something that we believe the FDA in the US, the European health authorities, who are traditionally the gold standards of assessing regulatory, will look at and will make a fact-based decision based on to approve.
So during your tenure at the foundation, I'm curious, what is the innovation that has stood out to you the most, that has been most impactful, and what next innovation are you looking ahead to the most?
Yeah, well, there's so many to choose from, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to do two looking back, and then I'll do one big umbrella one looking forward. And looking back, it really has been in that power of both vaccine technology, where you've been able to actually increase the range and scope of different childhood vaccines, which are the most effective ways to save lives. So new vaccines against rotavirus, which tackled diarrhea, against meningitis, which used to kill thousands of people, primarily in Africa. And the power of vaccines is extraordinary when they work, because they do save lives. That's an amazing prevention. We've also seen it in other areas like agricultural development. We've been developing some amazing new tools, seeds and crops that can grow in drought and flood resilient context. So in the face of climate change, where it's the smallholder farmers, mostly in Africa and Asia, who did the least to cause climate change, did not contribute to any greenhouse gases, but we're able to provide them tools, resources, training, ways to access markets, ways to understand markets. This is a private sector self-sustaining solution in the future. So those are two really extraordinary things we're proud of that we think we'll keep building on. And really, I know it's overhyped, but in this case, very concretely, we believe the potential of AI in many of the spaces we work at is extraordinary. It has to be AI intentionally used to focus on the needs of the poorest. So to take education and healthcare, AI can help a teacher, an overstretched teacher, understand much better what bit of a math problem is a 9th grade student struggling with? How can they adapt? Can the student have better interactions? We've got some great pilots underway which are showing both here in the US and globally some very extraordinary early results. And the same thing in healthcare. We think it's going to be an amazing force multiplier, but it requires an intentionality of trying to get the use cases that are going to help serve the poorest, because naturally the market will go to the wealthy.
Right, definitely. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Mark.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming in. There's much more Asking for a Trend on the other side. Stay with us.
U.S. stocks climb, rallying on trade optimism as Trump says buy stocks now. Yahoo Finance's Jared Blickery joins us now with the trading day takeaways. Jared.
Thank you. First up, guess what? Head and shoulders above resistance. What does this mean? Well, let me show you. Pictures worth 1,000 words on the Wi-Fi Interactive. That's why we have it here. This is the NASDAQ 100. S&P 500 looks similar, but I like the way this pattern is kind of just shaping up in the NASDAQ 100 here. This right here is an inverse head and shoulders, and we don't have the right shoulder just yet, and it might be a little bit smaller, could be a little bit bigger, but this is what I'm seeing right now. The key is we need to punch above the neckline, so that's going to be around 21,000 or so. What that tends to do is then you get another reaction, and eventually you go much higher. And it tends to be about the same distance as this high to this low right there. So that's called a measured move. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in the indices, but we're not there yet. Got to clear that 200-day moving average. That's right there with the neckline. Here's the sector action for today. Already did this at the close. Just want to show you the 4-day, how things are progressing here. Had a bit of a downdraft this week, but we're seeing industrials and tech leading. But let me show you from the bottom here. We have a clear example of cyclicals leading. These are the sectors that lead with the business cycle that tend to move the best. XLK is tech, XLI is industrials, XLY is consumer discretionary. And then this is the S&P 500. So those are outperforming. Just underperforming slightly is materials. That's another cyclical sector. So this is kind of a risk-on environment and something that I've been paying a lot of attention to. Again, we're not crossing the Rubicon just yet, but we are very, very close.
Also, I hear you've been taking a hard look at the dollar again.
Yes.
Jared, what have you been seeing?
All right, we got a dollar decision to make here because the dollar is also at a critical juncture. What I found really interesting today was that the dollar and yields were moving in the same direction. Now, before Trump took office and started with the tariff talk and all the tariff enactments, that was the case, but then things changed. They started going in opposite directions. Today, they started going in the same direction again, and I'm going to show you a chart of the US dollar index, and I'll start with the year to date. And you can see it's been pretty much from the upper left to the lower right. That is down 8%. That is a big amount for a currency to move, especially the reserve currency of the world, in a very short amount of time. What I want to show you here is the 3-year chart, because most currencies are mean reverting. That is, they tend to go sideways, and when they go to they travel too high or too low, they tend to go back in the other direction. So this is a 3-year chart, and we can see that we came below this support line that we had met several times before. And we also recently had a venture above the resistance line that had met at least once. And this was kind of an oops there. That was a fake out. It left a lot of people long the dollar, and then they got crushed to the downside. They had to reverse. Maybe we're seeing the same thing here. Maybe the dollar wants to go higher. And the reason I think that is it's almost become a consensus trade on Wall Street that the dollar is going to go lower. So that might not be the case. It could very well do that. But if we go higher, I am expecting to see, what is that, 108 again. And if we go lower, well, let me show you a 10-year chart. We could go a lot lower. And let me just put the max on there. You take a look at the euro, we could go all the way up to, let's say, 130 or so. So the dollar, if it breaks this level, we got some more support underneath, but I'd say 90 is probably within sight. So that would be a pretty big move for the US dollar.
Speaking of currencies, crypto making moves.
Yes, crypto is on the move. It broke out yesterday, and this was after the Fed announcement. Now, crypto doesn't always lead, but when it does, I pay attention. And it looks like crypto is kind of leading this new risk rally that we saw take place in the post-Fed announcement here. This is since the bottom. Let me just do a year to date. Actually, let me do an intraday, and then we'll plot some of these. So Bitcoin is up almost 6% today. Let me show you the year to date on this chart. And this is going to show you that we are marching towards these record highs. This was 107, 108,000. And right down here, remember I said we were going to go to the low 90s. Didn't quite reach that, missed it by 2,000, but pretty close. And we just broke up recently here. What I'm also watching is Ethereum. Ethereum's up 20% today. This is a huge, huge breakout. This is a year to date. Let me just show you a 1-year chart. And then you can see this line right here. That is a nice break to the upside. And what I like about crypto here is we're seeing a little bit more participation. Solana's up 11%, Ripple's up 8% as well.
I was going to ask you what the other sort of tokens, coins should be on your radar.
Yeah, let me pull up the year to date again on this, and I'm going to show you what I'm looking at because I think it's really favorable. Now, this is a year to date, and you see a lot of red here. So this was a negative. But within the last month, that has changed. And let me just show you the equal weight so you can see Bitcoin's somewhere in the middle around, what, 30, 33, 34% in there. But a lot of tokens doing a lot better. Even Bitcoin Cash up 56%, Solana up 53%. I got Monero in the mix there. So all of this together, all of this bullish action that we're not just seeing in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but the other ones tells me that we probably have the making of another crypto rally, at least to the existing highs that we have.
There we go. All right, thank you,
right.
buddy. Appreciate it. Lyft topping first quarter earnings expectations. The rideshare company highlighting record first quarter gross bookings. Lyft also lifting its share repurchase program to $750 million. Rohit Kulkarni, Roth MKM Managing Director, Senior Research Analyst, joins us now to discuss. Rohit, always good to see you. So Lyft reports that stock is rallying in the after hours. Walk us through your reaction, your response to what that report said, Rohit.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I think after Uber reported, after Dash reported, I think the expectations for Lyft were not that heroic in a way that people were a little bit cautious. I was a little bit cautious in a way that perhaps second quarter guidance is something that they may not be able to provide that would be very encouraging. What is the biggest positive in all of this is the number of rides. The number of rides that people take on Lyft, that's the actual kind of metric that we track outside of bookings, outside of revenue. And that is probably the healthiest we have seen in a while, both in 1Q and both what they expect in 2Q, mid-teens growth. So I feel the moment kind of the marketplace starts to function very well, rides work, rides grow, and that's what we are seeing in Lyft.
Rohit, the conference call is going to start shortly here, 5 p.m. Eastern. If you had the chance to ask an executive a question or two, what would be top of mind for you?
Again, it's the obligatory question about how have trends changed in March and April as compared to what your normal patterns have been. That's your tariff question, macro question, whatnot. Leaving that aside, I think what I would love to learn is how sustainable is the current growth, and with all the new products, the new drivers that you have on the platform, how confident do they feel into the second half of this year that they can sustain this mid-teens growth rate, which then would imply that Lyft is probably a profitable company for the first time in the history of Lyft.
Now, Rohit, though, you're still neutral on this name. So walk us through, why are you still on the sidelines, and what would you need to see before getting more bullish?
I think from a ratings perspective and a stock call perspective, I think what we need to see is, again, baby steps which are very consistent. I think this is the first time in quite a while, to be honest, Josh, that Lyft has reported 2 quarters that have been consistent, which is a positive step in the right direction. unfortunately, as a small company, as a company that does not decide the price of its service, it tends to have extreme volatility. So you may have one good quarter, second bad quarter, third good quarter. So there is no consistency. So for us to have a more medium to long term conviction in the stock, in the company, I think we just need consistency. And I think we are starting to see signs of that.
What about their recent decision, Rohit? They announced this decision to acquire FreeNow, which would give them a foothold in Europe. Did you like that decision, Rohit, strategically and financially?
It remains to be seen. As in, I think it feels that acquisitions is the next leg in growth for almost every company like Uber, like DoorDash, like Lyft. Uber acquired a company in Turkey. DoorDash acquired a couple of companies recently, and Lyft is doing the same. So I feel there is now these companies are at a point where they are profitable enough. They are generating sufficient amount of cash, and now they can start to do consolidation. Lyft has always been 90% US, 10% Canada, and now I think they feel that there are pockets in Europe that they can be a number 2, number 3 player behind Uber to start to grow that addressable market. So it's verdict still out. We like the acquisition, but how they execute on it remains to be seen.
You know, Roy, David Risher became CEO in April 2023, so 2 years on the job now. You've covered this company, you know this company. I'm just curious to get your take, of the job he's done.
I would give him 4 out of 5 stars. By that, what I mean is, I think he has turned around the company and has created a narrative amongst investors in a way that is extremely encouraging. Now, the proof would be in the numbers that they put up on a quarter-over-quarter basis. But overall, from a cost structure, from a product, from an execution, from operations, and overall from a narrative standpoint, I think he has done a fantastic job. Now, all we need to see is consistent execution. Last 2 years have been almost like preparing for the moment of today or over the next 6 months. Hopefully, they can execute on what they have built in the last 2 years.
Rohit, always good to see you. Always great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, let's take a look at what's trending after hours now. Shares of Affirm, Pinterest, and the Trade Desk all in focus. First up, Affirm Holdings sinking. That's despite earnings coming mostly in line with expectations. Full year guidance from the buy now, pay later company came in below analyst estimates. Affirm did boost its gross merchandise volume guidance for the fourth quarter, which came in above expectations. Meanwhile, Pinterest reporting a miss on earnings, but topping revenue estimates in the first quarter. Company noting artificial intelligence helping with growth in the quarter, with monthly active users growing 10%. Looking ahead, Pinterest providing a second quarter revenue outlook above estimates at the midpoint. And finally, shares of Trade Desk surge in after hours. Company reporting results for its first quarter and beating analyst estimates for earnings per share. Those coming in at 33 cents. The CEO citing strategic upgrades made by the company in Q4 for the strong first quarter. Company also forecasting revenue of at least $682 million for Q2. Well, that is a wrap today on today's Ask for a Trend. Be sure to come back tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Eastern for all of the latest market moving stories affecting your wallet. Have a great night.